6:44, let's have a look at the Sunday newspapers. And the Sunday Telegraph says the PM has rejected demands from the government's climate advisers to halt the expansion of airports. The Mail on Sunday's front page says every Tesco store worker will be offered a body camera. That's after an increase in violent attacks on staff. And the Sunday Mirror's front page reports that hackers linked to Russia have seized details about security at our nuclear weapons base. Let's leave those front pages there and move on to Emma Wolfe, who's joining us in the studio. Good to see you this morning. Should we start with the Express and the Chancellor's pledge over inflation?
Yeah, well, this is good news from Jeremy Hunt. He thinks it's good news. We know that in January, Rishi Sunak announced that he would halve inflation by the end of the year, that he would get inflation down from 10.1% to this sort of mythic 5% figure, although it should really be around 2%. So this is Jeremy Hunt being very upbeat and bouncy and saying that we're on course. He says our plan is working and the government is unlocking the UK's potential.
Does that make you feel warm and fuzzy?
I don't think it does. I think that we can hear, and we heard yesterday from the ONS, the same thing, that we're doing really well, that we're doing actually a lot better than many G7 countries. In fact, we're doing one of the best of all the G7. But I think until people start to see it in their wallets, in their pay packets, at the supermarket, I don't think this is actually going to resonate with many people. Yeah. I think as we go into a general election year, it's all about the economy, isn't it? It really is all about the economy at the moment. We're heading into winter. What are we, second, third day of September? I don't think people are feeling, if you ask people, do they feel richer? Do they feel any more affluent, more comfortable, more secure about things than they did a few months ago? And we've just been through the summer. I don't think people would say that they do. So we can have all these statistics, and yes, it's good news. If they do feel that inflation is at least under control, that is, of course, good news.
I don't know, I just get the feel... To me, that comes over smug. Jeremy Hunt saying, look, aren't I clever? That's how it feels to me. And I'm thinking, OK, he's thinking of the economy, yes, but I'm thinking of my home.
Exactly. And that's my point. He's talking about the economy. He's talking about things like investment in Britain. Well, I'm sorry, of course, long-term that matters. No one would deny that matters. But when you're actually talking about people's daily lives, food prices haven't come down. Pay packets haven't gone up. Even though we hear that they have, and fuel bills are, you know, and there is no help from the government as well.
You see, I agree with what the government has said in terms of things like, well, the inflation rising was not actually our fault. And I know I can see the sense behind that, but then also tied in with that, well, it's not because of you that it's coming down again.
Yeah, there is that argument. But also, I would slightly disagree, Stephen. I think things like food price inflation being at 18, 19% over the past year, people have been really struggling. That can, I mean, it's controversial, but that can be under the government's control. There are things they can do, whether we think they should intervene or not. There are things they can do. And I think a lot of people feel that actually the supermarkets have been taking the mickey a little bit. You know, that there's always these excuses about wholesale prices, the war in Ukraine. We've heard it, we've heard it, we've heard it. When does it actually start to make people feel better? And I wonder whether this winter is going to be a lot easier for a lot of people. I kind of doubt it. But anyway, apparently we're heading towards 5% by the end of the year. Yeah,
well, good. Actually, sticking with the supermarket theme, in the Mail on Sunday, they're looking at this Tesco story and body cams. I mean, it's all falling under Broken Britain. And I think though this story is important in itself, of course it is, the idea, this concept of Broken Britain is very hard to get away from at the moment.
It's really depressing, and it does, as you say, it feels sort of, it does feel kind of it's true with what we see around us. Not only the crumbling schools and buildings and ceilings that we'll talk about in a minute, but this feeling that people are depressed, that wages aren't going up, that prices are too high, that it's not very feel-good at the moment, is it?
You can't afford to buy or rent.
The broken syndrome, though, it's more than just that, isn't it? Because even though we might feel desperate, we can't afford enough food, we're worried about the future, we're worried about how we're going to send the children to school, it doesn't give you the excuse to go into Tesco and get really violent and horrible with the frontline store.
No, and this is specific. Yeah, this specific story is really quite shocking. The British Retail Consortium have said that attacks per day have gone up on staff in retail have gone up from 450 a day back in 2019 to over 850 a day attacks. This is verbal, physical abuse that they're putting up with. So in the Mail, I think it's the Mail, yes, the Tesco CEO has been talking about this crime epidemic, which he talks of as an epidemic of lawlessness, antisocial behaviour, sweeping Britain, sweeping through our very, very sad and depressed and deserted high streets, that his staff, he's offering them body cams, and he's talking, he's saying that they are being physically and verbally assaulted every single day, and that when crimes are reported, shoplifting, things like that, they're just not really responded to.
Well, apparently it's getting to the point where some thieves are so confident that they won't be confronted and the police won't be called. They are quite openly going into supermarkets and just taking things off the shelf.
And as a security guard or as a member of staff, what are you supposed to do in that situation if someone is going to be violent or abusive?
You tackle them to the ground, you'll be done for assault.
Yes.
The police would respond to that.
You could be seriously hurt, exactly. So I think this is a really, really sad, but I think it is this theme of broken Britain, which is across the papers at the moment. You can't escape it. You know, where is the good news?
Yeah. I just, do you know, I would struggle to believe it, though, because I've never seen... And I'm in the I'm always popping to the supermarket. I've never, ever seen any trouble at all.
All right,
however...
All right, I was going to say, our viewers have been in touch already.
But my mother-in-law works in a supermarket. She's on the shop floor in a supermarket, and she complains about being abused by customers all the time. All the time.
I've seen plenty. I've seen security guards trying to accost people and being, hit or pushed or shouted at, or, I think one does see that quite a bit, actually.
I was in a department store, in the kitchen department, and somebody, I couldn't believe it. Somebody just walked in, picked up one of those boxes that was full of crockery, like a 24-piece crockery set, and just walked out. That was that.
Walked out the store?
Yeah. We were near a door. Just walked straight out the store. And I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe what had happened. It was brazen. And I turned to one of the store assistants, and she went, huh? And then she didn't know what to do. She didn't know what to do. It was just so brazen, and it happened in front of us.
And then we have the problem of police. Police numbers are, they're massively under-resourced. Should they be attending these kind of crimes, or should they be pursuing more serious crimes? But when we know pretty much that the police aren't on our streets, I think last week I was mentioning the gang that go up and down our street, and I'm in central London, a fairly nice area. They go up and down our street and snatch phones out of people's hands. OK, right. So we're not allowed to carry our phones. Yes, but everybody in my area, everybody in the neighbourhood knows it's a gang of young lads. The police won't go after them. They won't just simply either tackle them to the ground. But do you remember when coppers used to be brave? Coppers used to be have-a-go heroes. They would tackle a young guy to the ground and say, give that back.
Yeah, but it was rare that young guy would have a knife or a gun, but nowadays...
Of course, I know, but we put the health and safety of the police before everything else.
But it is down to that respect. Anne's been in touch, who says, I've worked in retail on and off for years. I'm always polite. The customer doesn't see a human behind the counter. And amongst other things, I've been called names and reduced to tears for refusing alcohol to underage people or those with no IDs. And it's that respect thing. Yes, frustrating, especially if you're old enough and you can't get served. Yeah. But you've got to have respect. But you
wouldn't even think of abusing somebody behind the counter for that, for not selling you.
So what is the problem? The problem isn't bad headlines. The problem isn't, a government in which you don't have very much faith. The problem has to go deeper than that, doesn't it?
I think it does. I think it comes down to antisocial behaviour being quite accepted and rife, the problems of education, the frustration of not being able to get a good job. I think a lot of young people feel, what can they do apart from sit around on computer games?
But it's family. Is it broken homes and family lives? Yeah, bad parenting.
But I think all of those things contribute, and they always have. But I think at the moment there doesn't seem to be. How are you supposed to feel hope when you can't get a job, you can't afford to go to university, you can't get accommodation even if you wanted to, and pretty much, what's the future? You'll never be able to buy your own home. I don't think that young people are particularly kind of full of hope for the future or full of optimism.
They're certainly
No,
not.
but they should still, even so, they should have respect.
It's right and wrong. We're not taught right and wrong by our parents anymore.
Well, because we're terrified to tell people what to do. I mean, you know, you sit on a bus and you hear people shouting and screaming and playing their music, and you don't dare say, well, could you turn that down? Could you offer a lady a seat? That kind of thing. I don't think we're allowed to intervene. And it's not just young people, is it? It's not just young people.
No, it isn't.
No, it's not.
Shoplifting and things
isn't.
can be homeless people or people who are just genuinely
Well, look,
in need.
I've got if you're in need, I think it's a different kettle of fish. But it's those people who aren't in need and just taking because they feel entitled.
Kaz says, my daughter works for the travel agents and experiences abuse every time there's an issue. On one occasion, they had to keep the doors locked because one particular customer was threatening. I had to escort her and pick her up from work so she didn't have to walk out of the store herself.
It's terrible.
And just quickly on Betty in Dorset says, we were taught right and wrong from birth, and in school we followed the rules. We were also taught respect for others and their property and belongings. Seems to be an awful lot of people have children and then take no responsibility for them. I'm sort of with you.
Do you know, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think
Look,
with parents.
we're going to leave it there, but we'll see you a little bit later on.
Yes,
Emma,
thank you
thanks
very
very much
much.
indeed. Let's see if we can cheer ourselves up with a look at the weather for you this morning with Jonathan.